What would you do if you came home early and found your little boy walking with crutches on the floor beside the housekeeper, cleaning, laughing, and looking happier than you had seen in months? For millionaire Robert Manning, that single moment would challenge everything he thought he knew about his son, his home, and himself. Robert Manning rarely returned to his Connecticut estate before 9 o'clock at night. His schedule was a fortress of meetings, calls, and obligations. If he arrived home at all, it was usually long after his son was asleep and his wife had already retreated to their separate wing of the house. That evening, however, the quarterly meeting in Midtown ended 2 hours earlier than expected. The driver turned off the highway, and by 7:40 p.m., Robert was stepping out of the car and into the cool night air, his briefcase still in hand. He hadn't called ahead. He wanted to see the house as it really was, not as it looked when staff scurried to make things perfect. Robert loosened his tie, adjusted his cufflinks, and pushed open the front door. The familiar smell of polish and lavender greeted him. The foyer lights were dim, shadows stretching across the marble floor. For once, the silence of the mansion felt heavy instead of comforting. Robert placed his briefcase down and walked toward the great room. Halfway through the doorway, he froze. His pulse quickened as his eyes tried to register what he was seeing. On the polished oak floor was Beatriz Alvarez, Bay, though Robert rarely called her anything at all. She was 28. A quiet housekeeper who blended so seamlessly into the household routine that Robert sometimes forgot she existed outside of payslips. But tonight, Bea was not invisible. She was kneeling on the floor, sleeves rolled, scrubbing at a spill with strong, deliberate strokes. That alone was ordinary. What was not ordinary was the child beside her, Peter. 4 years old, pale blonde hair, big blue eyes that carried a seriousness far beyond his age. His small body leaned on purple crutches, the kind meant for children who struggled to balance. In his tiny hands, he held a dish towel, dragging it clumsily across the wet floor. Robert's first instinct was confusion. His second was disbelief. "Aunt Bea, I can clean this part," Peter said with determination, his crutches squeaking slightly as he adjusted his stance. "You've already helped so much, my brave helper," Bea replied gently, her voice carrying warmth Robert hadn't realized she possessed. "Why don't you sit on the sofa and let me finish?" "But I want to help. You always say we're a team." Robert's throat tightened. A team? When was the last time his son had looked so proud of himself, so eager to belong? "All right, just a little longer," Bea relented. "Then you rest." Peter grinned, continuing his slow, awkward wipes. Then lifting his head, he spotted his father in the doorway. Surprise flickered across his face, followed by hesitation, then hope. "Daddy, you're home early!" Peter tried to turn quickly, lost balance and nearly tipped over. Bea caught him before he fell, steadying the boy with practiced hands. She looked up, startled. "Good evening, Mr. Manning. I didn't realize I was just finishing here." Robert stepped inside, his gaze moving between them. "Peter, what are you doing?" "Helping Aunt Bea," Peter said proudly. "And today I stood all by myself for 5 whole minutes." Robert blinked. 5 minutes. He turned to Bea. She hesitated, then nodded slightly. "He's been practicing." "Practicing what?" Robert's voice had an edge he hadn't intended. "Just balance exercises, strength games," Bea explained quickly. "Always after my duties are finished, or on my lunch break. I never neglect my work." "You're not hired to do therapy." The words came out colder than he meant. "I'm not asking for more pay," Bea said, eyes lowered. "I only want to help him. He's special." Robert narrowed his gaze. "Special how?" For the first time, Bea raised her head fully. There was fear in her eyes, but also conviction, because he doesn't give up. Even when it hurts, he keeps trying, and he cares more about others than himself. He asks if I'm tired. He asks if I'm sad. He's a child with a big heart, Mr. Manning. Peter had shuffled closer, eavesdropping. He wedged himself between the two adults, leaning on his crutches. "Don't be mad at Aunt Bea, Daddy. She helps me when I cry because my legs hurt. She says I'm strong like a warrior. Robert's chest ached. Warrior. When was the last time he had encouraged his son with such words? His own voice sounded foreign as he cleared his throat. Buddy, go upstairs for a bit. I need to talk to Bea. Peter frowned. Now? Just for a little while. Bea knelt down and whispered, I'll still be here when you come back. Peter nodded reluctantly and hobbled toward the staircase. At the top step, he turned and called, Aunt Bea is the best person in the whole world. His small voice echoed down the hallway before fading. The silence between Robert and Bea was thick. How long has this been happening? Robert demanded. The exercises. Since I started working here, about 6 months, Bea admitted. Robert's jaw tightened. 6 months. 6 months of his son practicing, struggling, smiling, and he hadn't known. He had been too busy in boardrooms and private jets. You're not trained, he said sharply. No, sir, I learned from experience. My younger brother was born with leg problems. I spent my childhood at therapy clinics with him. I watched, I learned. When I saw Peter so lonely, so sad, I couldn't just watch. Her words struck harder than she likely intended. Lonely, sad. Was that how his son saw himself when his father wasn't around? Robert studied her face. No arrogance, no self-interest, just determination and a quiet sadness. For the first time, he noticed the redness in her hands from scrubbing floors, the damp marks on her knees. He realized she had been giving his son something money could never buy: time, patience, belief. Before he could respond, footsteps thudded on the stairs. Peter had returned, clutching his crutches tightly. Daddy, you're not going to fire Aunt Bea, are you? Robert blinked. Why would you think that? Because you told me to go upstairs, and when Mommy's upset with the maids, they don't come back the next day. Bea lowered her head, ashamed. Robert felt heat rise in his chest. No one is getting fired, he said firmly. He knelt to meet his son's eyes. Peter, do you really like doing these exercises? Peter's eyes lit up. Yes. Aunt Bea says if I practice enough, one day I'll run like the other kids. And when I do, I'll work with you, Daddy, just like you work with your company. The words sliced Robert in half, pride and guilt in equal measure. His son wanted nothing more than to be like him, yet Robert had barely been present. He looked back at Bea, then at Peter. For the first time in years, Robert Manning felt the walls of his carefully built world begin to crack. Robert waited until Peter had climbed the stairs again before he turned back to Bea. He crossed the room slowly, his polished shoes clicking on the wood, and lowered himself onto the leather armchair by the fireplace. He didn't invite her to sit. He only gestured with his chin. How often? He asked. Bea twisted her apron nervously. Every day, sir. In the mornings before his online lessons, and sometimes during lunch if he asks. Does my wife know? A shadow crossed Bea's face. Yes, sir. Mrs. Manning is aware. She allowed it. Robert's pulse ticked faster. Christina had never mentioned it, not once in months of conversations, sterile and brief as they were. Why didn't either of you tell me? Because you're busy, sir. Bea's answer was soft but carried a sharp edge. Mrs. Manning said you had enough to worry about with business. She said the medical specialists already had their plans, and she thought you wouldn't want interference. Robert clenched his jaw. He thought of the physiotherapist who had charged thousands for each session, the endless routines of braces and exercises, all wrapped in medical jargon, and here was a housekeeper claiming she had achieved more in 6 months than the professionals had in years. You're not a licensed therapist, he said again, almost to himself. No, sir. I only know what I learned from helping my brother. But Peter tries with me. He believes he can do it. That matters more than credentials. Robert leaned back, rubbing his temple. He wanted to dismiss her words, to reassert control, but he couldn't ignore what he'd seen. Peter had glowed with pride when he said he had stood for 5 minutes. His little boy, so often quiet, withdrawn, guarded, had looked alive. Do you understand the risk you're taking? Robert asked finally. Yes, Bea admitted. If you think I crossed a line, you can dismiss me. But I couldn't watch Peter give up on himself. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the antique clock above the mantel. Robert studied her, the steadiness of her gaze, the trembling of her hands. He thought of how invisible she had always seemed in the house, until tonight. At last he said quietly, "Tomorrow morning, I want to see." Bea blinked. "See what, sir?" "The exercises. I'll watch them." She nodded, relief softening her shoulders. "Yes, sir." The following morning, Robert did something he hadn't done in years. He cancelled his early meetings. Instead of boarding a train into the city, he remained in his home office until he heard Peter's laughter drifting from the garden. He stepped outside and froze again, not from shock this time, but from something he couldn't name. Peter stood on the grass, pajamas swapped for shorts and a t-shirt, his crutches resting nearby. Bea knelt beside him, guiding his hands as he steadied himself. "Count with me," she urged. "1, 2, 3, Peter said, voice trembling with effort. Robert's chest constricted as he realized what was happening. The boy was standing, unsupported. 4, 5, 6, Peter shouted, wobbling but determined. "Excellent," Bea encouraged. "You're stronger every day." Robert swallowed hard. The therapist had said this milestone could take years, and here it was, unfolding in his own backyard, while he had been too busy in boardrooms to witness it. Peter spotted him and lit up. "Daddy, look! I'm doing it!" Robert forced a smile, his throat too tight to speak. He raised his hand in a clumsy wave, and Peter beamed even brighter. That night, Robert confronted his wife. Christina Manning sat on the velvet sofa in the living room, scrolling her phone when Robert entered. "We need to talk," he said, without preamble. She looked up, wary. "About what?" "About Peter. About Bea." Christina's expression shifted, not to surprise but to resignation. "So you finally noticed." Robert stiffened. "You knew." "Of course I knew. I told her she could help him." "And you didn't think to tell me?" Christina set the phone down, her voice cooling. "You're never here, Robert. When you are, it's all questions about doctors and bills. You never ask if Peter laughed that day, if he felt proud. Bea noticed what you didn't." Her words cut deep. Robert sat across from her, struggling to contain his anger. "I provide everything he needs." "You provide money," Christina shot back, "but Peter needs presence. He needs someone who believes he can be more than his diagnosis." Robert's fists tightened. "And you think Bea is the answer?" "I think Bea gave our son something we failed to. Hope." The room fell silent. Christina's eyes were sharp, but Robert saw the exhaustion behind them. She had been carrying their son's emotional weight alone, leaning on the housekeeper while he chased contracts. For the first time in years, Robert felt small. The next morning he kept his word again. He sat on the garden bench, tie discarded, watching as Bea led Peter through stretches and balance drills. His son's face glowed with sweat and determination. When Peter managed 30 full seconds standing unaided, Robert clapped, awkwardly at first, then with real enthusiasm. Peter's grin stretched ear to ear. "Did you see that, Daddy?" "I did, buddy. I'm proud of you." Peter's eyes sparkled. "Can you watch again tomorrow?" "Yes," Robert said without hesitation. "Tomorrow, and the day after." Bea looked at him, surprised. Their eyes met for a brief second, and Robert saw something he hadn't expected. Trust. For the first time in a long time, he wanted to deserve it. If you're moved by how Robert's life is beginning to change, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this incredible story. The journey is only getting started. The days that followed felt unfamiliar to Robert Manning. For years, his mornings had been defined by alarms, rushing drivers, and the train into Manhattan. Now he found himself on the back lawn at 8 a.m., jacket draped over a chair, watching his son attempt feats he had once been told were impossible. Peter's progress was undeniable. Each day he stood longer, balanced straighter, and smiled brighter. The boy who once shrank from challenges now begged for harder exercises. "Can we try the stairs tomorrow, Aunt Bee?" he asked one morning, gripping his crutches like weapons. Bee laughed gently. "One step at a time, warrior." Robert stood by, half in awe, half in shame. He had missed so much. At night, though, doubts crept in. He lay awake beside Christina, staring at the ceiling. Was it safe to trust an unlicensed housekeeper with his son's therapy? What if something went wrong? Yet the counterpoint was undeniable. Nothing else had worked, and Peter believed in her. That belief was fuel stronger than any medical device. Christina noticed his unease. One evening after dinner, she said, "You're wondering if you should stop it." Robert didn't answer. "Don't," she continued. "You'll break him if you take this away. He's happier than I've ever seen, and he looks at you differently now because you're finally watching." Her words struck deeper than she realized. Robert remembered Peter's quiet confession. "You're my dad, not my friend." That sentence haunted him like a ghost. He needed to change it. The following week brought an unexpected test. Christina's social circle, wealthy women who spent more time in charity galas than at home, came for a mid-afternoon visit. Robert returned earlier than usual, slipping through the side gate just in time to hear laughter echoing from the garden patio. He slowed when he recognized a sharp, familiar voice. Helena Whitmore, Christina's oldest friend, known for her expensive jewelry and sharper tongue. "It's sweet, really," Helena was saying. "But honestly, Christina, don't you think you're letting the help get a little too close? A housekeeper playing therapist? It looks inappropriate." Christina's polite laugh rang false. "She's been good for Peter." Helena sniffed. "That boy is fragile. He needs professionals, not some maid pretending she's an angel. People are starting to talk." Robert's blood ran hot. He stepped into view, startling the women. "And what exactly are they saying?" Helena blinked, then smiled tightly. "Robert, we were just discussing how fortunate you are to have such loyal staff." Robert's voice was calm, but iron threaded through it. "Bee has given my son more than any specialist ever has. If anyone has a problem with that, they can stop coming here." The silence that followed was heavy. Helena's painted lips parted, but she said nothing. Christina looked torn between relief and embarrassment. That night, Christina admitted, "She shouldn't have spoken that way, but you embarrassed me in front of them." "They embarrassed themselves," Robert replied. "I won't let anyone belittle the person who's giving our son hope." For the first time in years, Christina had no rebuttal. Weeks turned into months, and Peter's improvement accelerated. He managed full minutes without crutches. He walked short distances across the lawn. One afternoon, with Robert watching, he took 8 consecutive steps and collapsed into his father's arms, shouting, "I did it!" Robert held him tightly, tears burning his eyes. "Yes, buddy, you did." But the miracle in the garden came with a hidden cost. News of Peter's progress spread quietly through the neighborhood, and whispers reached the ears of Robert's rivals. One afternoon, Robert received a call in his office from Marcelo Sanders, CEO of a competing firm. After small talk that felt like a trap, Marcelo said, "I hear you have a remarkable housekeeper. Talented with children, they say. My grandson could use someone like her. I'd be willing to double her salary." Robert's hand tightened on the phone. "Bee is not available. She's part of our family." "Everyone has a price," Marcelo replied smoothly. "Not this time," Robert snapped, hanging up. He didn't tell Bee about the call. He didn't want to burden her. But a knot of fear grew in his chest. Could he really protect her if others tried to lure her away with promises she couldn't ignore? His fears proved justified. 3 days later, Bee knocked on his office door, eyes red. "Mr. Manning, I received a job offer," she said quietly. Robert's stomach sank. "From the Sanders family?" She nodded. "They promised a salary that could change my family's life. Health insurance for my mother. Tuition for my brother. It's a lot." "And?" Robert asked carefully. Bee's hands trembled. "I don't want to leave Peter. He means too much to me. But my family, this could lift them out of struggle." I don't know what to do. Robert leaned forward, his voice low but firm. Then let me make you a counter-offer. Stay here. I'll match their salary. I'll provide insurance for your mother and education for your brother. You'll continue your studies, and you'll do it without losing what you've built with Peter. B's eyes widened. Sir, that's too much. I can't accept. You can, because you've given me back my son. You gave him belief, and you gave me a second chance as a father. No amount of money could repay that, but this is a start. Her voice broke as tears spilled down her cheeks. Then, I'll stay. For Peter. For all of you. Robert felt relief crash over him. For the first time, the house felt less like a mansion and more like a home. That evening, Peter found Bea in the kitchen, wiping her eyes. Aunt Bea, you're not leaving, right? She knelt, pulling him close. No, warrior, I'm not leaving. Peter squeezed her neck, smiling. Good, because I still have so many things to learn. Robert stood in the doorway watching them, struck by how a woman who had entered his home as just another employee had become the cornerstone of his family's transformation. And for the first time in decades, he allowed himself to feel grateful not for a business deal, not for a stock price, but for the unexpected gift of presence. The spring sun lit the Manning garden like a stage. Birds sang in the maple trees, and the air smelled faintly of lilac. Robert sat on the back steps, tie abandoned, sleeves rolled, watching as Peter balanced on his own 2 feet. No crutches, no hands, just determination. 30 seconds, Bea counted, holding her breath as though her own balance depended on his. Peter trembled, sweat beading on his forehead. 40. 50. And then with a shout, he stumbled forward. 3 steps, 4, 5, before collapsing into his father's arms. I walked, Daddy, did you see? I walked. Robert squeezed him, voice breaking. I saw, and I've never been prouder. Bea wiped her eyes with the edge of her apron. She had seen countless victories in that garden, but this was the one she would remember forever. The day Peter broke through the wall everyone said was impossible. Weeks later, the victory grew into something larger. The neighborhood school hosted its spring recital, a chance for children to showcase talents before parents and teachers. Peter had begged to participate. I want to show them I can walk. I want everyone to know I'm strong. Robert and Christina sat in the crowded auditorium, nerves buzzing. Bea sat in the row behind them, hands clasped tight. When Peter's name was called, the lights dimmed. He stepped onto the stage, his crutches left behind. A hush fell over the crowd. He stood tall, small chest rising and falling, then walked across the stage. 10 steps, steady, deliberate. Gasps broke into applause. My name is Peter Manning, he said into the microphone. I used to need crutches for everything, but then someone special believed in me. She told me I was a warrior, and because of her and my mom and dad, I can walk today. He pointed toward Bea, who froze, tears spilling freely. That's Aunt Bea. She's not just our housekeeper. She's my teacher, my friend, my family. The crowd erupted in cheers. Christina clapped, openly crying. Robert rose to his feet, joining the ovation, his chest swelling with pride. Bea covered her face, overwhelmed. After the recital, parents swarmed around them, curious. Who is she? They whispered. How did she do it? One mother approached Bea directly. My daughter has cerebral palsy. Could you help her? Robert watched as Bea answered gently, describing simple exercises, speaking with the confidence of someone who had found her calling. That night, he pulled her aside. You've changed more than Peter's life, he said. Have you thought about what comes next? Bea frowned. What do you mean? A center, a place where you can help other children, where parents like those today can bring their kids. I'll fund it. Her eyes widened. Mr. Manning, that's too big. You're not just anything. You're the reason my son walks. If you want this, I'll make it happen. For the first time, Bea allowed herself to dream aloud. A center for children, a team of therapists, a place filled with hope. Then that's what we'll build, Robert promised. 2 years later, the Hope Therapy Center opened its doors. The building was bright and colorful, decorated with murals of children running, laughing, climbing. State-of-the-art equipment filled the rooms, but it was the spirit inside that made the place different. Families walked in, burdened with fear, and left carrying hope. At the entrance hung a framed photograph. Peter, now 6, sprinting across a field, arms stretched wide, pure joy on his face. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Dedicated to the warrior who taught us that miracles are born from belief." B, now formally certified as a pediatric therapist, served as the center's director. She guided a team of professionals, but she never forgot her roots. She still knelt on the floor beside children, whispered encouragements, and celebrated every tiny victory as though it were a gold medal. Robert and Christina supported the project with both finances and presence. They had rebuilt their marriage piece by piece, grounded in the lessons Bea and Peter had taught them. On the day of the grand opening, Robert stood beside his son in the garden where it had all begun. Peter leaned against his father's side, no crutches in sight. "Do you remember, buddy?" Robert asked softly. "The first time I saw you helping Bea scrub the floor." Peter grinned. "Yeah, you looked like you saw a ghost." Robert chuckled. "I thought I was seeing something I couldn't explain. But really, I was just seeing you for the first time, seeing how brave you were." Peter's voice lowered. "Daddy, do you think everyone gets an Aunt Bea?" Robert shook his head. "No, not everyone is that lucky, but everyone has the chance to be an Aunt Bea, to believe in someone when they can't believe in themselves." Peter thought about that, his face serious. "That's what I want to do when I grow up. I want to help kids, just like she helped me." Robert kissed the top of his son's head, his heart so full it ached. "Then you'll change the world, Peter, just like she changed ours." Later that evening, after the opening ceremony, the three of them, Robert, Christina, and Bea, sat on the porch as Peter played in the grass. The boys' laughter filled the twilight air. Bea looked at Robert, her expression soft. "Do you regret it?" "Regret what?" "Keeping me here, investing in me, changing everything." Robert followed his son's running figure with his eyes. "If I regret anything, it's that I didn't notice sooner, that it took me years to see what was right in front of me. You didn't just save Peter, Bea, you saved all of us." Her eyes shone with tears. "You gave me a chance I never thought I'd have. And you gave me my family back," Robert replied. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Peter ran toward them, breathless and glowing. "Daddy, Mommy, Aunt Bea, did you see how fast I was?" Robert scooped him up, laughing. "We saw, champion. We'll never stop watching." And in that moment, surrounded by the people who had remade his life, Robert Manning realized the truth he had chased for decades through empty boardrooms and endless deals. The greatest fortune he would ever hold wasn't measured in dollars, but in the love that filled his home. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe one person's courage can change an entire family's destiny?